This podcast is brought to you by Podspot Events.
Hello and welcome to the Bondi Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Beattie. We have some very exciting news to share in the Bondi Podcast. We have our first ever sponsor, Remote. We all know about the cost pressures facing Australian businesses at the minute. Well, Remote provides businesses with the top virtual assistants in the Philippines to help support their businesses at a lower cost. You can hire someone to help with admin, accounting, marketing, social media, customer service, and much, much more. It's a great way to scale your business faster and at a lower cost. And I wanted to make sure that I got a good deal for our listeners. So our friends at Remote are giving Bondi podcast listeners 2 weeks absolutely free and waiving the $800 sign-up fee. All you have to do is go to the website www.remote.com.au/contact and use the referral code Bondi. The link to the Remote website can be found in our bio on our Instagram account, and it's also in the show notes as well. Once again, the referral code to use is Bondi. And if you're interested in supporting the podcast as well, please get in touch over Instagram. Now, the guest on this episode is Leticia Lockhart. Leticia is a women's online physique coach and has her FMG Pro card for bikini fitness competing. I first met Leticia back in 2020 when she was a trainer at the Bunker Gym in Surrey Hills. It was only after knowing Leticia for a few months that I became aware of her incredible backstory and the journey that she's been on. In her teenage years, Leticia became addicted to crystal meth. This eventually led to Leticia being arrested and spending a year in rehab. In this episode, we talk about Leticia's full journey, from growing up in Perth, battling addiction, getting arrested, and her recovery journey, which still continues today. I want to say a massive thank you to Leticia for coming on and sharing her incredible story, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. As always, remember to give us a follow on Instagram at the Bondi Podcast to stay up to date with all of our guests and episodes. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll find all of our episodes on Spotify as well. Cheers. Leticia, welcome to the Bondi Podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on, mate. Look, you were actually meant to be our second guest. So this interview has actually been a long time coming, mate. So really, thank you for coming on.
No, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's about, 8 months in the making?
8 months in the making. And I didn't have to update my notes or anything like that. So it's just always good for me. Look, Leticia, the first question we ask all of our guests, and I know you're not living here anymore. You lived here 4 or 5 years. So what's your favourite thing about Bondi?
Oh, look, there's a few. I'm going to have to say Anita's. Anita's gelato. That's pretty up there.
Anita's over Messina?
Yes, Messina's too thick.
Right.
It's like, don't you find that? No?
I'm more of a Messina guy.
Okay.
I know that's controversial.
Well, we can't be friends.
And what's your order?
So I used to have this one called salted popcorn. And it was that with Cookie Man and then like all of the sauces, like the Biscoff spread sauce. But now, I don't know. Yeah.
So you're in town for a few days.
Yeah.
You're probably going to make a few trips.
After this. Well, I got a $20 voucher for Italo House at the Blue Hotel where I'm staying. So I might have to head there and then you head to Anita's.
Sounds like a good night, mate.
Yeah.
Perfect. Look, Leticia, let's start with the mugshot.
Oh.
Now, that's the picture on your Instagram to me that stands out the most, and it tells a bit of a story in itself. You and I first met each other back in 2020. You were working at the Bunker Gym at the time. I was going training at the Bunker Gym. We were like hanging out together. And then I we'd been friends on Instagram for a long time. Then one day I saw you post this photo and I was like, what on earth's going on here? This is, as I said, this is the picture on your Instagram that stands out most to me. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, it's a picture of you in jail at the age of 26. Sores all over your face, addicted to crystal meth. So the story we want to tell here tonight is effectively how you ended up in that position and your amazing journey from that point to where you are today. So in advance, I'm really thankful to you, Leticia, for coming on to share the story. I think it's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, thank you.
But I think let's start, if you could take me back to Perth, where you grew up. What was growing up in Perth like? What was your family dynamic like? Just to try and set the scene, I suppose.
Yeah, look, like let's not jump into the jail photo straight away. So Perth is It's small, it's dispersed, and I was very fortunate to grow up in, I had a really good family, brought up quite well, Italian, so quite strict and very enthusiastic, let's call it, with their beliefs and how things should be done, and which there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I also grew up in a very broken home. My dad was abusive, killed my baby sister from beating my mum up when she was pregnant, which I watched at a young age of 3 years old. And I just remember, I'll never forget this moment. And it's like from that moment, I just watched my life develop without understanding how I could contribute it and become my own person. And I just remember like passing my mom this towel to wipe the blood.
At the age of 3?
At the age of 3. At the age of 3. And I've actually never really shared that part with a lot of people. But I just remember from that moment, everything became a blur and my life passed and I made decisions, but it was like I was never present. I was never making a life for myself, if that made sense, because I was so consumed in trying to not end up the same way that my mom did. But obviously, when you go through these events and you experience trauma, you either go through it or you can become a victim to it. And my mom, I love her dearly, but having men in the house and having a community and a household that, was thriving and trusting and loving was something that maybe she wasn't ready to do or wasn't ready to allow in the household. So unfortunately for me, I went to a great school, had a great education, but I didn't know who I was. And I very quickly found myself in a state of fight or flight from a young age, which you don't know what that is at that age. You don't understand what your nervous system is, how it operates, how you act on impulse. And naturally that led to some really, really poor decisions, from a very young age.
So what did that feel like, Leticia, that fight or flight? Like, how did that show up in your day-to-day as a child or a teenager?
Yeah, it showed up in a lot of rebelling from home, because I wasn't allowed to have, say I wanted a boy over or I wanted this or, and that was my mom doing the best with what she had at that time to try and raise me, to be a really strong, respectful young woman. But for me, I saw that as I'm going to end up, alone. And I didn't obviously have that father figure, so I rebelled. It showed up in me wagging school. It showed up in hanging out with older people that were gang members and that were, I had girls in my year that were dating bikies and XYZ, whatever it was, but hanging out with people that would take me away from that path that, my mom was set for me. And what that felt like was confusion. It felt like excitement as well, because at that age it's exciting, right? There's these cool people and, you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing and who wants to go to school. And because that side of things didn't make sense, like I didn't understand, it's quite easy to hang out with the wrong people and think that you're cool. But going to school and feeling isolated in that path, it didn't resonate and it didn't land with me at that time.
Sorry, Leticia, where was your dad at this point? You mentioned him earlier. Where was he at this point?
So my dad left when I was about 4.5, and I still, the boxes are still there of the years and years and years of court proceedings, custody battles, thousands and thousands of dollars just, Mum was trying to essentially establish a co-parent relationship with a father who didn't really want to support his daughter or want to have any kind of parenting involvement in that process. So it was a really hard time for my family and my mum, especially after being abused and everything like that. So my dad wasn't around at all.
Do you know why he didn't want to be around?
No. He says that I was brainwashed.
By your mum?
Yep. He says I was brainwashed, which furthermore you can understand, like as a child who didn't quite understand either what was happening. Like I saw that as just more confusion and uncertainty. But I know what I'd seen, and I know the feelings that I felt in those moments, and I know what I saw, but being told different things, by your parents when you're young,
It's confusing time.
It takes a toll, and it was hard for me as a child to also watch my father cheat on my mother consistently, and not understand what that was. But yeah, it all makes sense now, right?
Yeah. Do you have a relationship with him today?
No.
When was the last time you saw him or spoke to him?
Last time I spoke to my father would have to be in the depths of my addiction, when I truly was last resort, and I reached out for help.
Didn't get it?
No.
Right. Let's you sort of painted a bit of a picture there about what your school life looked like and how it sort of transitioned into hanging around with the wrong crowd, and it was a little bit exciting. Can you, if you look back to that period, can you sort of pinpoint a moment where you started to go down that slippery slope toward addiction?
In terms of a pivotal moment, I would say for me, it was a moment when, and I haven't explained this yet, I had been going to, all of those festivals, walking to after parties where it wasn't just a fun dance around the house after parties. There were people shooting up heroin, smoking methamphetamine, piles of coke on a table. And I was just 18, like just 17, 18. So it was those moments, going to those environments, but then also the nights didn't end, at 6 a.m. or, 10 a.m. the next day. Because for me, I was also part of quite a toxic relationship from when I was year 12 through to 21.
With a bikie?
No. So this was with someone that was not involved in drugs. He actually lost his brother to methamphetamine, but he was not the best with women. And again, you can see how this stems back to my childhood. There was two of us involved. Both of us went to the same school, and both of us ended up addicted to crystal meth. And both of us with very, very broken childhoods, you call it. And we became best friends. And she introduced me to methamphetamine. And that was the moment, knowing that codependency issues that I had, knowing the path I was already on, but not realizing it. That was the moment that I realized, okay, like I felt a part of, I felt connected to another human also in pain. And I felt this sense of, obviously, with the introduction of amphetamines, this sense of, what's the word? It's not that I was untouchable. I felt invincible. And I felt the pain and the confusion fade away.
So how old were you when you first tried methamphetamine?
I just turned 17.
And I don't how do you take methamphetamine? Like, I have no idea.
Yeah, so on the surface, it's much more acceptable to be, it's smoked through like a crystal, like a glass bulb.
Right.
But then obviously the more you get into that world, the more people, I guess it depends who you associate with. Needle users are very frequent. So they're the two main ways of using it.
So smoke it and inject it?
Yeah.
Right. And do you remember that first hit?
Honestly, I said to someone the other week that I don't know, because by that point, like when I say it would be days and days and days, and I look back now and I remember saying to one of my friends it's really sad because I don't think that he's ever going to make it out. I remember saying to him a while ago, like, it scares me how much we used to use back then. Like, it terrifies me. Like, I'm not scared of drugs. I'm not scared of any of those kinds of things. Like, I've made it out the other side. I've relapsed more times than anyone would ever know. But what scares me is, as such a young girl and such an underdeveloped, woman, child, how, and that's what makes me sad. because I was so lost that
It's okay, mate.
I don't understand. Do you know what I mean? And when I've had relapses now, I look at that and I'm like, it's nothing. It's nothing. And, it was years, and strong to toxic relationships there's no worse combination. There is no worse combination. So yeah, it wasn't a pivotal moment for me. It was looking back now and going, holy shit, I had no idea. And you don't know with methamphetamine, you have no idea. It's always this far ahead of you. It's already got you, and you have no idea how, the depths of that, until things start to happen and your life starts to fall apart. So, yeah.
How are you getting your hands on it? Did you have money to spend on it, or?
Yeah, I did, but the circles we're a part of, you look at the different types of users and people that are so-called junkies, and I hate that word. I hate that word, because a junkie is someone that's all they know. They may not have ever had access to people that have a lot, or that they may not have had enough money, but they have an addiction. Of course, they're going to do those things to get it, and act the way that they do. That's how they've been brought into that world most of the time. Whereas for me, it was the polar opposite. There were never enough bags, and I'm talking kilos. So for me, it was this group or this group or this group. It didn't matter. It was everywhere. And it was not long after that they had and a lot of people may know about it, a huge, probably one of the biggest in Australia, crackdowns on methamphetamine in WA, because it was a huge problem. It still is. It still is.
How often were you, at that period, sort of in your late teenage years, early 20s, how regular were you using? How often were you getting high, I suppose?
It would be Thursday through to Monday initially. And for me, because I initially was connected to that first relationship I spoke about, and the trauma and the come downs from that, finding out, your partner has done something, or it feels like you're dying. So for me, I would run. I would use and use and use, and I would be anywhere but to sit and stare at a ceiling or come down or feel those feelings, because that's what I couldn't handle. That was my danger zone. That was the unsafe, portion for me. If you're looking at it from a safety perspective, that was the area where I couldn't be. And so I would go until I dropped or stopped or passed out or blacked out. And, as the story goes on, it obviously led to some really not so great situations. But for me, it would started and it would go for about 4 days. And then the come down, I'd have to eventually regroup, come back to life, go to work at Rio Tinto. I was a graduate accountant at this point. I would try and pull myself through work, and it was hell.
So you're a graduate accountant at Rio Tinto, and you're trying to hold down a 9 to 5 for a massive Aussie company.
Yeah, which I got fired from.
Why did you get fired?
I was caught on camera smoking methamphetamine in the car park.
How old were you at this point, Leticia,
I had just turned 21.
And what happened? Did you just get pulled into the manager's office the next day? Or?
The thing is that they knew something was up, and I had such an incredible team, and they were all beside themselves having to let me go. And the night before, I had to go in and they sent me home, and then I got to come back and kind of plead my case and talk to them about it. And I remember the night before, I was at home. Mum was on another, as any parent would be, going ballistic. She didn't understand what was happening to her daughter. And there's no way in hell I was communicating that to her.
No.
I was just never there. And the two people that were incredible support was two people that by society's definition wouldn't, I shouldn't have been around, but two people from my using days that are incredible humans, even though they're using. And I went there and I remember just laying down on one of the beds and I just laid next to my friend. And for hours, the whole night, I didn't sleep. Obviously, I'd been using, you don't sleep. I laid there and I was like, you've got to do this. Like, you've got to go in there. And having that support from someone who was also, stuck in everyday addiction, there was no one else. When you get, caught out as being a using addict, where do your friends go? They disappear. We'll help you when you get help, with the words. And those words, I hear them and I just, to this day, like I have so much anger. I've gone a bit off tangent, but
No, it's okay.
So that for me, I had to go in there and pack up my things. At the same time, I was also in a second relationship with a guy who was also using heavily. And on that same day, he chose to basically expose to the world or to everyone in our circles that I was using and denied any involvement himself. Meanwhile, he had so much in his drawers in his bedroom.
Why did he do that?
Denial, shame, embarrassed
To be with the user?
Embarrassed that he was doing it. Embarrassed to be the user. And in that moment, everything faded away. And that is the pivotal moment for me. Having been caught from Rio Tinto and having that come out into public and him being behind my back communicating with all my friends. And it's almost like they were conspiring this whole thing to come out. And I just fell. And I remember I disappeared. I packed my things and I don't remember how I got to one of my friend's houses, but I got out. And that was it. It became every day.
When you got fired from your job, is this the first point in time that your mum is aware there's a problem with her daughter?
I think I had such a wall up against Mum and we had such a lack of communication by this point that I don't even remember. I don't remember.
So what happened from this point onward?
So
did you try and get help or did you go the other way?
I remember, and a lot of the things that I say and the beliefs that I have around addiction are, I guess, quite controversial, you could say, because
that's what we're here for.
It is a drug that is not, it's not something that society accept. But to be honest, I've seen people on coke benders, I've seen people use coke, and they're worse people that they're worse than half the people I would spend time with or choose to, and I still would today. What was your question?
My question is, what did you do after you got fired?
What did I do? Yeah, so I remember basically the pain of all of that coming out at once, and this was a partner that I thought I loved. I thought I was so consumed by this person. And the thing is with relationships, you see and you hear relationships with drug addiction and the chaos and the things that happen, and it's the one thing that after that moment I never went near anyone, and I was, it was a lot to recover from. The pain of having someone impact your using so much. And when I say that, I'll get to your question in a second. Having someone be using with you and you're very obviously emotionally connected through those using times, then finding out something really bad that's happened or they've done, as you're about to come down and they've got work the next day, the amount of times my boss would pick me up off the floor at work, and support me and help me. And fast forward after all of that, your strength declines. And I remember all of that coming out at once. And I called one of my friends who's still using today, and they said, I can't move. The pain, I couldn't move. I remember just being on the floor hysterical, and he said, see that thing that is ruining your life across the room from you? Pick it up and use it. It's the only way you're going to get out of your environment and get to me. And that sounds like such a bad thing. And yes, it is. It is. But in that moment, I was too far gone in my eyes. I wasn't going to get help from anyone. I had no one around me. I felt like I'd been betrayed by everyone I cared about. Bear in mind that half of my friends had used meth as well. They'd tried it. And I picked it up, and I remember I got to his house and that was it. Gone. It's this memory of just falling down a well. Like falling down this well, and no one came to save me. No one. It's not that I needed saving, but at that point I did. And I could have. I needed one of my friends to come up to me and say, hey, like, I'm here for you. Not, I'm here for you when you get help. You know, because what happens if, okay, you're going to walk away and then someone's life, you know, what if something happened in that moment? So yeah, that was what happened. And from that moment on, it was every day. And then obviously in living in that world, it got worse.
You're not living at home at this stage,
No,
Leticia?
at this point.
Where are you living?
At friends' houses.
Just couch...
Couch surfing.
Couch
I would go
surfing,
home.
yeah.
I could still go home, and I would go home when I was down and out, and I would pass out in the driveway, the car still running. I would have maybe potentially crashed on the freeway somewhere and been, you know, had woken up with dogs through my car, been dragged into, you know, lock up overnight, been charged. Then I'd go home. It was always a different scenario, but by choice, I would never really go home.
And what would your mum say to you when you went home?
Screaming, like the screaming, the hysteria. And obviously that's when it would kick in about what the fuck is going on? Like, what am I doing? And I couldn't handle it, so I wouldn't be there.
How did you end up in jail?
I remember a natural progression in that world, if you're there for long enough, is you start selling. You know?
Okay.
And I did that as a protection mechanism because I never wanted to depend on males for drugs. Slippery slope. That's why a lot of girls end up as prostitutes, or they end up, you know, in really compromised situations. You know, it's already bad enough. How I started, I started selling, and I was traveling like quite a while south this one night, and I went to pick up a new amount, and I drove back through the city, and I was actually planning on going home because I was like wrecked, and I was like, I just want to be home. I'd have those moments and I was so sad, and I just wanted to be at home in my bed. I wanted everything to stop, and I was falling asleep at the wheel, and so I was like, fuck, like I've got to get off the road. And I remember I detoured off into a part of the city called Northbridge. And as I've come around the corner, there was a learner car instructor driver who'd seen me swerving and was like, what is going on here? It was 2 a.m. So she followed me, and I pulled up at the lights, and I've like almost fallen asleep, and I heard this like knock on the window. And then as soon as I wound it down, I was like, what? Because I was so tired, she's ripped the keys out of the car. And she was like, you are not driving. Get your stuff out. I'll take you home. We'll put the car on the side of the road. And so I've pulled all my stuff out to the side of the road. She's gone to drive the car through the lights went gone green on the other side of the road. What I'd failed to realize, or what just bad luck, is that around the corner was the 24-hour watch house. So cops would come around the corner on the patrol and seen what was going on. And obviously they'd stopped. Looked at me, looked at her, looked at all my stuff everywhere, and searched me. I didn't have enough time to hide anything.
How much did you have on you at the time?
Almost an ounce.
All?
Pardon?
An ounce?
Almost an ounce.
Right.
Which is a jailable offence.
So they took you...
So they took me into the watch house. I don't remember much after that. I got my phones taken off me. I did get out the next day.
Is that when the mugshot was taken, Leticia?
No. So that was shortly after. So I got let out the next day, and from that moment on, things went from bad to worse, and that's how I ended up in jail. Basically, I had about a year somehow between then, or maybe a little bit less. It's all quite a bit blurry. By this point, my using it had progressed a lot. And in that time, if you are found out in that world to have been caught, and there's also a lot of people that didn't like the fact that a girl could have quite a substantial amount of drugs and be trusted. People can get quite nasty. Rumors were spread around about me being what's called a snitch. Plus, I had surveillance from cops on me. Plus, I had mum caving in on me. And that pressure, plus not being sure of what's real, what's not, plus using a ridiculous amount at that point, it starts to... It had been like 7 years by this point, 8 years. You start to question what's real and what's not. And then using out of fear and in that environment, it'll make you go insane. You'll lose your mind. And that's what started to happen. And I still to this day don't know. Like, there were people in roofs at times. It used to happen. There were raids. There were things that happen in that world that are normal, that people like you guys will be like, what the hell? But when you're told you have people gang stalking you, and when you're told XYZ, and then you think these things are happening, but then you also know that you're hearing certain things that can't be happening, then you don't know what's real and what's not. And yeah, I think about a year passed, and I actually ended up in jail because I had that charge laid on me, and then charges since then. And my mum took out a violence restraining order to stop me coming home, and just like using it as a base. But then she called me one day in tears and tricked me to come home. And the neighbours heard me and called the cops. So they got me because I wasn't supposed to be there.
Despite your mum's asking you to, was that a setup? Your mum set you up like that? Why?
Because she
think jail was going to be the safest place for you?
I was going to die. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's nearly like it's nearly like an act of love, right? Your mum's...
Yeah.
Your mum's thought this is the only way we can keep her clean for a bit, if we put in place a sting operation like that.
Yeah.
How'd you look back in that moment? I imagine at the time you were probably fucking furious, but...
I hate cops. I still do to this day, and I understand I'm so angry about that moment. I understand it. I understand there's a need for things like that, and at that point, like, there was no way I was getting clean. I was in my darkest hour. I was using needles by this point a lot, and I would be dead if I hadn't have been dragged into jail. I'd be dead. And it wasn't the amount that I was using, that it was the way that it was using in the environment that I was in, because I had always used it a lot. But in that environment, when your mind is compromised, which happens to everyone eventually, like, I wouldn't have lasted much longer, and I'm still paying for it today. I get into my bed at home, and the trauma of the amount of times I've been dragged out of my bed by police. It's not something that is very easy to process, especially when sometimes it was for no reason. Like that, men barging into your house with that kind of a background that I grew up in as well. Yeah, I was a very, 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 very broken and angry girl who wound up in Bandiat Women's Prison. Yeah.
So you got charged for being on premises with your mum. What was the charge? How long did you get sentenced to? So
the charge that went on my record, but the main charge was that a cell supply charge. So I spent 9 weeks in jail.
Is that how long you were sentenced to? Or
No. So basically I was in there, I forget the terminology now. Where is it, remand or, yeah, I believe that's what it's called. And basically you either stay there till your court sentencing or someone can get you out with like surety bail. So my auntie did after 9 weeks of begging. And basically what that means is they put something up to say, hey, like I will, look after this person, or hey, like I will vouch for this person. I believe it's a financial commitment. I actually don't remember. But my auntie got me out and the plan was to fight the charge, which I did with everything that I had. I was relapsing. I hadn't even cleaned 9 weeks, and trying to manage that plus fight a charge was a really, really hard thing to do. Like I hated everyone. I could not connect with anyone. I had sores all over my face. I felt so disconnected from the people that I was meant to be trying to prove something to, which made it really, really hard. So in the end, I was supposed to be, the charge could have been anywhere from 4 to 10 years. And I was very, very lucky to be given the chance to go through a court-ordered rehab program. And obviously my past of, private girls' school, good family, good upbringing, I got really lucky. And my judge looked at me, and she used to work for the prosecution. So her job was definitely not to favor someone like me. She looked at me and she said, what happened? Like, what happened to you? We know you, like we've been following you for so long. She's like, yeah, it was almost a humbling experience to have the judge speak to me directly like that, and to give me a chance, and to know that I wasn't just a piece of shit. I wasn't just a using drug addict. There was a story behind it, and my intentions were never to just use to end up on a mindless bender. So I was lucky. I went through a court-ordered rehab program.
see, when you go through a court-ordered rehab program, Leticia, like who pays for it? Is it the government pay? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware. And there's different types. So they have ones that are more of like therapeutic communities, which I did not sit well with. I got kicked out of that one.
Why did you get kicked out?
So essentially, like when you have a lot of people in early recovery for different reasons in one place living together, what tends to happen is they become codependent on each other, which is a problem, because if one person gets out and relapses, what happens to the other? So they have these very strict rules of you're not allowed to have what's called an exclusive relationship with anyone, be it female to female, female to male, male to male. You have to be neutral with everyone. And these are the rehab programs that are now being introduced into jails, like this therapeutic community approach. It didn't work for me because you were also locked away from society for an extended period of time. And I wasn't ready. Like I found out, I wasn't ready. I got kicked out, relapsed straight away, had my court case brought forward because the courts found out I was out of rehab. And I went to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and I was just like, someone needs to help me. Like I'm going to jail. And one of my friends brought me to the most amazing, like I could never be more thankful for the Salvation Army. Brought me to their doors. And I just remember knocking, and I was like, you need to take me in. And they were like, we have a waiting list. I was like, I don't care. And I laugh about it because it was such a really empowering experience, which is what I believe addicts need. They need faith and hope drilled into them, not to be condemned as these scum of the earth, when half the time they're not, And they took me in Bridge House, which is like a detox clinic. I didn't need to detox when I went in there. It's like a holding space before you go to Harry Hunter's, which is up in like the hills in WA. And it's beautiful. Like you get your own, you're not in a dorm. You get your own room. You get your own house with 4 other rooms in it. It's beautiful. It's like you learn to live again. You learn to live. You learn how to feed yourself, cook, how to garden, play with the chickens. I mean, you can't really play with chickens, but you go on hikes. If you want to use, off you go. You get time out. It's a lot less. It's structured in their approach and the things that they teach, but it's a lot less strict. So it doesn't work for everyone, as you can see. But for me, that's what I needed. That's the approach that I needed.
So when you were in rehab, what sort of things did they do to address your addiction and get you clean?
So they do a lot of different things. They have, it is a Christian, like Catholic based program. So you go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, and in those meetings, obviously that's your space to share about your addiction, whatever you want really. And you're also given leadership roles within that space, which is nice because, from being in places where you are not given any responsibility, you've lost all of that, it's nice to start rebuilding. So you do things like that. You go to church, they have choir, they have, you have a lot of classroom work in which they do things like they go through a lot of really profound books. Like they'll, suggest The Power of Now. They'll suggest...
That's what I'm reading at the minute.
I just checked into the Blue Hotel and it was there. And funnily enough, this tattoo right here says, in Spanish, "This too shall pass." One of Eckhart Tolle's quotes.
Yeah. I'm about halfway through. I'm really enjoying it.
And they introduce you to a lot of Brené Brown. Things around shame, things around, so that they teach you different ways to heal and to understand and manage your addiction, which it's pivotal, because if you can't understand, what you've been through, and you can't understand why you are the way you are and why you function the way you are, how the hell are you going to get or stay clean? And for a lot of addicts, like, getting clean is not the problem. It's, that's a part of the problem, but it's what happened before. Like, why are you the way you are? Why did you end up addicted to this? For certain people, yes, it is just about the drug, but for the majority, there's so much more behind it. And if you can unpack that and actually access, like, what went wrong within you, or what was missing, where that void is, what you need to learn, how you can use your addiction to turn it into a strength, because it is. If you can do that. And that's a lot of the stuff that they teach you, is that it's not just bad, because what does that do? Like, how does that help save a life?
Hey guys, quick favour from me. It would really be helpful for the podcast if you could just take a second to make sure that you're following the podcast on Spotify and that you click the subscribe button on YouTube. This will help the podcast grow and ensure that we can keep bringing quality guests to you guys. Thanks.
When you were in rehab, did you get to the bottom of why you were using Leticia and be able to sort of unpack all of that? I
was, and it's not something that it's not something that you can unpack for me, it was 10 months in rehab. I only needed to stay for 4, but it's not something you can in such early recovery, because you're just trying to rewire your brain patterns. You're trying to learn how to function, do your washing, like the littlest of things. You're learning how to find joy in the simple things in life. Things like that, they don't come till after. You don't start unpacking that. You don't start learning about you and about your addiction until years down the track, really. Yeah.
I'm just taking it all in as well, mate. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
How far into rehab did you start to feel like yourself again?
I didn't.
No?
No, I didn't. I found fitness and health.
While you were in rehab?
Yeah. Because obviously when you don't eat for 10 years, you're a very small human. Very small human. And then when you discover food and the amphetamine starts to come out of your system and you are detoxing, you put on weight.
Yeah.
And so I started to find fitness and F45, community. I found a community that didn't know, which is what I thought I wanted initially. I found a community that I felt normal, and I could just start to, I learn a new skill. And that initially for me was a safe place. So I was obsessed.
So while you were still in rehab, you could go to F45?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
okay.
so you're allowed time out, and I'd go there. I'd go to NA meetings when I'd get out of on my days out, and it's little bit by little bit. Like you are so, it's really hard to live in a world that you've lived in a different light, and I refer to it as the upside down. Like for those of you that have seen Stranger Things, it's you're in this world, but it's the upside down. So everything is existing in a different world that this world has no idea about. So it was hard to come back and actually walk down a street in a new light. So for me, it took a really long time. And it wasn't until, I guess I started rebuilding and I started coaching, that I actually started to regain my power and find out who I was and have confidence again. Started coaching group classes, and I was like, oh, all eyes are on me. And remember, I was the one with the sores on my face with the hair. I'd cover my face with my hair so people wouldn't look at me. Like, I couldn't look at people in the eyes, and I certainly couldn't look at normal people in the eyes because I had so much anger. So I started to build that back in little bit by little bit. And
so were you coaching at F45?
Yeah, so I started coaching at 45, and then at a strength and conditioning gym as well. And yeah, that's where the journey started.
I know, Leticia, you've got a really special connection with Bali, and Bali was sort of part of your rehab journey as well. Can you sort of tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I owe my yoga teacher, instructor, training love for Bali to my beautiful friend Brenna, who I'm still friends with today. She was actually someone that used to come around to the rehabs for the Hep C talks. And I knew her from high school. She went to one of the other girls' schools. And I said to her, I was just like, you're just doing so well. I was just so inspired by her like calmness and ease and flow through life. And she's like, you should do your yoga teacher training. She's like, you should do it with a guy called Les Leventhal. And I was very, I absorbed a lot of people's, things back then and just explored them. I was like, does this sit? Does this not? And Les just turned out to be a gay recovering methamphetamine addict, who is an international yoga teacher now. And he was just so happened to be doing his teacher training in Ubud. Like I timed it really well. So I got out of rehab and I started my PT course. As soon as I finished that with the Australian Institute of Fitness, 9 days later was this one in Bali. But I'm not allowed to leave Australia, am I? You haven't been, your court case is still going, Leticia. So what makes you think you are going to Bali? Anyway, so I have walked into the court case, asked for, and I've spoken to, like I had to put a request in for, I don't even know what it's called, like to be heard. Mm-hmm. And I've told my judge I'm going to go to Bali. She's like, are you okay? And I pled my case. I told her why, and she let me go, made an exemption. I was really, really lucky. And so that was I just had this calling. I was like, I need to go. And that, I would have to say, is where the healing truly started. Like that trip. It is one thing to go through rehab and be surrounded by addicts who are all talking about drugs, and you think you're healing, but that's not real life, And going to Bali on my own and being in an environment where everyone's very spiritual. No one judges. I was me. And I realized the passion that I had for my story and the protectiveness I have over it. And I realized, what I always knew, which is like my healing started when I realized that moment that yes, I had an addiction. Yes, I destroyed my life. Yes, I lost everything. But I got through that addiction because of the way that and this is the part that I find really hard to talk to people about, because people will go, and society thinks very different. Society thinks rehab cures and stopping using cures, and no, because you can then just go and use again. It's like, what is it? Where's your internal strength? And how did you get yourself out of it somewhere or another? Because, you can have a court case, you can go to rehab, but you can still go and use and die. And for me, it was in those moments where I was actually so addicted, like so addicted, like you're screwed either way. I remember saying, like, just keep everything as normal as possible, like, as like, don't get into chaotic situations with like where you're going to lose your mind. Don't get in that space of a come down, because that to me was losing control. And in the end, yes, with everything going on and silence and whatever have you, I lost it in the end. But for the majority of those 12 years, 10 years using the amount that I did, and it's not about talking about the amount, but how the hell did I keep it together with managing life here? Most addicts are just in that world using, and they don't last that long. And for me, the healing came when I realized, like, it is actually a strength and a power, the way that I managed to know that something was 10 steps ahead of me, know that like everything was falling apart, but being able to actually keep myself in a state of trying to make it normal. And that sounds so absurd to some people until I went to Bali and it made sense again. And I spoke to Les and he was like, yeah, like you can choose to use and lose your mind straight away and just be stupid or engage in what's called cooked things, that is what society sees most addicts doing. They see like
doing cooked things.
Yeah. And with a drug like that, are you sure that's what you want to do? Like you won't last. And for me, like the reason why I made it out and that I'm so passionate is because I realized in Bali, like going through all of that, the transformative process of breaking myself down, doing death meditations, having some...
Sorry, what's a death meditation?
Oh my goodness. Everyone needs to do it. Basically, it's like this meditation where it was Les in this case and his assistant Kimberly. Kimberly was on the drums and she was your heartbeat. So she would boom, 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 boom in a silent room. And you close your eyes and he takes you from 24 hours out to, you're going to die. And he takes you through all of these scenarios and asks you all of these questions about what would you do here? What
sort of questions?
Like, basically questions that lead you up to that, like the 11th hour when you're about to die. And the last question is, are you happy with all of the choices you've made? Are you happy? Are you ready to pass? And asks you, what would what would be, oh God, I can't remember. It was a long time ago. And obviously you're in a meditative state. He asks you, what would be the last thing you'd say to your mum? What would be, where would you spend your last 12 hours? How would you, what would be your last meal that you would eat and who would you eat it with? It was everything. And it was about a 2-hour meditation. And that broke me. Like I remember, I'll never forget that moment because all of a sudden the drums stop. And Les says, but you didn't die. And how are you going to live your life different now? And for me, I found that moment, it took me back to the 2 times, which were 2, where once I was almost killed, I guess you call it, by someone who, I haven't really shared a lot of this, who basically injected me with something that should have killed me, and I was frothing at the mouth. And then the other time when I almost tried to take my own life. And that took me back to those 2 moments. And I wrote down, like, here's pen and paper in front of us and this little bracelet. And it said, how are you going to rewrite your story? And that for me, being alone in Bali, I chose to go there on my own with these people from all around the world. And people in Ubud are a different breed too. They live different. Like, I can talk about my addiction and know that it'll never, it's received in such a different way. And their stories are just so inspiring. Being around that environment and coming out of that process, along with a month of an immersion in yoga, it changed me. It changed me and it set me on this path of this confidence that I knew I was always going to be okay. And I was always going to have my own back. Because if I had it through all of those years when no one was there to save me, no one no one cared really if I was dead or alive. Like they might have, sure they cared, but not enough to come find me, you know? And that's when I was like, you're a survivor. Yeah.
So when you left Bali and came back to Australia, where did you go? Back to Perth, or did you come to Sydney?
Yeah, I came back to Perth and I was really inspired by a lot of fitness people as well. And I knew that there was something in there. It's like with the confidence I was gaining from coaching classes and then starting to work with clients. I had a call with Hattie Boydell, who is or WBFF now called FMG, pro fitness competitor. And she used to run something called the Sports Model Project. And I had a call with her and her assistant Katerina about why I wanted to join. And I joined that, and a little while into it, Hattie was like, you have crazy potential, you should compete. And in my mind, I didn't see the dieting and the competing side of it. I saw stage and I saw lights, and I saw that as my next step to actually me on stage in front of people. I was like, I can't do that. So I did. And I had no idea what I was doing, you know. Perth was really not clued on with FMG back then. They're still growing over there. And I went to the Gold Coast and I did my first bodybuilding show. I didn't place or anything, but I met my then coach, Jason 10K, and who introduced me to the owner of Clean Health Fitness Institute, Dane McDonald. And Dane, if anyone knows him, is a really persistent person. If he wants something, he'll make it happen. And he wanted me to come and work for Clean Health. So I competed, came back to WA, and within a few months, I was packing my stuff to move to Sydney. Yeah, to work for Clean Health.
And what did that look like in the early days?
A lot of gym sessions, a lot of they had a huge name. They're more in education now, but they were coaching back then. So working for a company that bred Lauren Simpson and Mark Carroll, big names in fitness, I felt so special. And I was like, wow, these doors were just starting to open. And I loved it. I loved every minute. I would not be where I am today if I hadn't have taken that opportunity and put myself out there. And it was a huge thing to do, moving across Australia. I was only a year and a half out of rehab, really. So I competed again. And
so you did your first comp in the Gold Coast in 2018?
Yes.
When was your next one?
2019.
Okay.
In the Gold Coast again. And then COVID hit, obviously 2020.
How did you go in the second one?
Second one, I was too lean. I placed 10th.
Okay.
Yeah, which that was okay. I wasn't a pro card, but so I placed 10th then. And shortly after that, COVID hit. And I went from basically the in-person gym shut down, and I went from an income to nothing, and I had no savings. So I started my business. Started my baby, the Female Coaching Collective.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So, look, it's still growing, but it is basically a space for all of the women that I coach to, I guess, grow through whatever it is, whatever reason they come to me for. And it's the word collective is obviously because it's non-exclusive, non-judgmental space, and I've coached women from, I guess, all walks of life with what I call as my superpower, my ability to see what's really going on for someone and connect with that. And yes, there's the fitness and nutrition side of things, of course, and I've specialized in photo shoots, and I think I've done maybe 6 with the girls now, and they love it. But the core of it for me is I guess understanding the woman underneath it all, and why she has these blockages and how to move through them. And I guess for me, it's why I do have such a long, lifespan of clients. They stay with me for a really long time. Because, look, I think my story it can be inspiring, yes, but it's how I use it to coach that I think makes me really different from everyone else. And it's something that I do pride myself on.
What blockages do you typically help your clients work through?
Well, look, there's definitely been my first client, and I love her to death. This is actually a really special part of my story. So at Clean Health, one of my first coaching clients that I was given was someone that had rung up and actually had the same birthday as me, and she had come from a very severe eating disorder. And like Dane said to me, he's like, look, I want you to talk to this girl, and I feel like you will have some kind of a bond and see if you can help her, because she was very skeptical. She'd had a few trainers before, and she was not in a good way. And from the moment we went for a walk and had this beautiful chat, and I shared straight away, like, which I always do, and I get told by so many people, don't overshare, like, don't share your stuff, and whatever.
And you're like, blah.
Literally. From that moment, just she looked at me, she was like, I saw that trust in her eyes, and we got her from, like, far out. I think she was 38 kilos. She was very unwell. I think she was
orthorexia or anorexia?
Anorexia. Hospitalized for a long time. That's probably my most, like, the biggest transformation in my eyes that I've witnessed. And that friendship, and that bond was so strong. So we got her up to eating like 2,500 calories. We got her, training consistently in the gym, but more so she found a friend,
Beautiful.
And she's a beautiful human. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing. Let's stick to the comps for a bit. Leticia, are you still competing these days?
I am.
Did you get your pro card?
I did.
So what is that for people who are not really familiar with this world of bikini fitness competitions?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it, and tell us what your pro card means as well.
Yeah, so essentially your pro card is when you win your show. You're given a professional status, which means that within the federation you hold, it's not like it's an authority, but you are someone that has obviously got a physique and an attitude towards the competing space that is worthy of being a professional athlete. So what that does is, it allows you to go to a lot of the workshops and things like that, and, assist the younger competitors. A lot of pros become posing coaches, or coach competitors themselves. And also it's a place to be a role model, for the right ways to compete and how to, I guess, use competing to enhance your lifestyle, and teach females the way, to, whether you're competing or not, how to achieve balance, but also be able to, go through these extremes should they choose to, but do them in a way that makes it sustainable and being able to enjoy all parts of the process, right? So professional athletes, have a good understanding of, being in what's called a building phase and having to eat more food. It's not just about being shredded year round. So that's what makes a pro, right? You've competed enough times. Most people don't really go pro first time they compete. You competed enough times that you've gone through that process enough that you have a good understanding of how to actually go in and out of a comp prep with making it sustainable.
So when did you get your pro card?
April 2022.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Was that the last time you competed?
It was. I plan to be back on stage this year at the October Gold Coast show, and then in Bali, which is, go figure.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so back in Bali again this time to compete.
And how are you feeling? But at that stage you won't have competed for nearly 2 years. How are you feeling about that?
Oh my gosh, so nervous. so nervous. But because the thing is with competing as well, it forces you to connect to your body. You have to pose, you have to move. It's easy to weight train, and it's quite a masculine, I guess, activity in my eyes. Whereas when it comes to posing and the ability or the amount of introspection and self-awareness you can gain from a competition prep is huge. You spend a lot of time on your own. You spend a lot of time on the cardio machines. You're posing. You're trying to evoke a feminine approach within your body, which for someone that has been through, may have been through trauma or may have been through, what I've been through, it was a very confronting experience. And that doesn't get any easier. You just get better at managing it and learning new things about yourself and new skills. So I'm very excited and nervous. But yeah, it's definitely, it's time to get back up there, and definitely excited for the Bali show. That one's going to be amazing.
Is that Ubud or Canggu or?
It's kind of down, I believe, Nusa Dua way. So more down the Uluwatu ends.
Beautiful.
Which, I feel like
you
I
can
just
just prep in bamboo, mate.
I know. I keep getting brought back to Bali. Like, a few years ago, I educate for a company called Women's Fitness Academy. So they're a Cert 3 and 4 provider in fitness that I used to run workshops for. And I remember one of their co-founders, Brendan, he was like, I want to start doing retreats in Bali for this. Let's plan it. A year later, they're happening. So I feel like Bali's just had this incredible healing energy on me over the years. First of all, with my teacher training yoga, and then obviously becoming an international lecturer over there, and then now competing. So just may as well move.
Yeah. Like anyone you speak to that goes to Bali, they do connect with it from a healing perspective. Certainly it really, really helped me. And I've actually got to thank you, because my happy place in the world actually is like Bamboo Gym in Uluwatu in Bingen. Like, it's just my happy place. Like, when I walk in there, I just, I can't explain. There's something to do with the energy in that little corner of Bingen, the cafe, the gym. It's my favorite place. And I actually, before I went to Uluwatu, I messaged you and asked for some tips, and you told me you need to go and train at Bamboo. So thank you. I've got about 3 or 4 bamboo singlets in my cupboard in there, but I have you to thank for that. And it is just my happy place. And things didn't go so well in January for me earlier this year, and I sort of ran off to Bali to train. Yeah. And that's exactly where I sort of seek refuge, I suppose. I was like, I need to go to my happy place, and ran straight to Bingen and just trained in there for 6 days, kind of by myself.
There's something about that place. It really is. It really is. I love, Bamboo was very similar to me. Like, I think during a few of my relapses and stuff, I always had a trip coming up there. And, I'm not one to hide away from, not my mistakes, but, my learnings, I call them. And, the moment I get to Bali, it's like, it's just that reset, it's that beautiful reset, and that ability to just hold your own energy in your own space. And I think it's just so important that people go to Bali and they have these feelings, and, we understand, like, it's special for a reason. It's like, what is that? It's because you go to this place and it's somewhere where you can be you, and it's void of societal pressures. It's void of, anyone telling you who you should or shouldn't be, and everyone's just there being an entrepreneur or on their fitness journey or just being free-spirited. The Balinese are so friendly, or they're just, so welcoming. And I really think that, the Western society could do with a little bit more of that energy around.
A little bit of Bali sprinkled everywhere. Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
Let's talk about competitions themselves.
Yeah.
They get a lot of bad press. And I know you feel quite passionate about this. So, like, when I looked up sort of the bad press they get, it's, these competitions can conflate health and fitness with looks and sexuality, promotes extreme dieting and an unhealthy relationship with food. What would you say to those comments about these competitions?
Okay, so yes, it definitely can, and that is when the comp prep is approached in a way to fill a void, to get lean for the wrong reasons, to just do it for the glitz and the glam. That is when I believe a comp prep becomes a problem, or something that, and having the incorrect coaching guidance is when a competition prep can become really nasty. Because yes, it is a vein. It is, you are putting yourself on stage to be, subjectively judged by judges on your physique development. And, you are comparing yourself to other people. But the difference, and what makes the difference between, a comp prep being deemed bad and unhealthy and something that you can actually grow from, is the person and the guidance they have, and their level of ability to turn inwards and use this as a journey for progress. which is why it's really important, you know, if you are going to compete, that you have a sound understanding of where your relationship is actually at with food. Because if, you know, someone is doing it just to get lean, and then they have that rude awakening that, hey, on the other side of that is a whole lot of hunger, skewed hormones, and a big rebound waiting potentially. Like if someone is not educated well, and they are not ready for all parts of the journey, then that is when it can become a problem. And furthermore to that, like post-show, it's never going to be perfect. Like you look at some of the biggest names in fitness and some of the biggest competitors, they've gone on such a journey through their competing life, but they are willing and open to learning about themselves through that process. And that's why I don't think competing is a bad thing if you have the right mindset. Yeah. And if you're okay to go through that process and build and grow and learn about yourself.
So if you get a new client coming to you, Leticia, saying, hey, I want to compete, will you sort of vet them first with these questions? Like what are the reasons you're really getting into this?
100%.
And have you had to turn anyone down before?
Yep. Yeah, many times. One, because I'll never put someone through a prep that I'm not confident can execute a dieting phase well, and I've not overseen that. Like if someone displays a lot of, like it's hard at the end of a prep. It's really, really, really difficult. And I like to make sure that my girls have, you know, I've seen them through a dieting phase. I'm confident they have the respect for the process to actually go through a building phase as well, because most people need to build as well. Like they'll come to you and be like, I need to get on stage. And it's like, well, actually you need to grow. You need to do this. If someone's not bought into that whole process, you're not getting on stage, not under my guidance. And similarly, I have a really big chat with them around, you know, the post-show reverse thing. And that's where a lot of clients go wrong and a lot of coaches go wrong, unfortunately. Like,
so where do they go wrong?
The post-show approach and the care for the client needs to be elevated post-show, not just dropped off. You can't just give a new competitor a strategy to navigate post-show and then expect them not to need additional support and guidance. And I think, you know, that's something that the industry is definitely, it's really growing and progressing in now, which is really beautiful to see. But as for the clients, yeah, you can tell if someone is having an experience through their journey that would not make them quantifiable for a competition prep. You can pick that pretty early on. So by standards, I like to say like 6 to 9 months you work with a client before you look at putting them through a comp prep.
Yeah. Are you, speaking from experience, have you sort of done some of the things that you would advise clients to do?
Of course. Like after my first show, I remember I had to water load. This is in peak week. I had to water load and pull salt out or something. I can't even remember much now. I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
And so I had a Magnum. And then I wasn't bought into the process.
Okay.
But in saying that, like I was very uneducated at that point in time. And also I was more focused on my other why. My why was stronger. You know, and I've also had a lot of food issues too over the years. You don't eat for a long time. You know, so my disordered eating patterns have been huge over the years. And every show that I've done, I've learned something different. And I've tried a new way to get to, you know, back to our healthy, normal balance. And over time you find what works. And for me, you know, following like what's called a moderate reverse, where you're increasing calories at a faster rate and getting me out of that deficit is the way to go. Other people, you know, some people need to go straight back to eating a lot of food and deal with the weight gain for their mental sake. Others can handle that slow increase of calories and deal with the hunger. It's really individual. But yeah, I've definitely experienced all of the binges, all of the pretty scary and unhealthy eating patterns.
So the reason you're in Sydney at the minute is you've got some girls competing this weekend.
Yes.
So they're about, it's Tuesday. We're recording this on Tuesday. They're going to be competing Saturday.
Yes.
Where are they at right now? Like what phase are they at? What did like today look like for them?
So like, I think the fears are, The fears will kick in maybe like a day and a half. And also they were last week. The last few days, it's been more like depleting carbohydrates and things like that. So it's like talking to a dead person.
Oh,
But then now they're also like feeding, and they've got all of their appointments last minute, and they've got photo shoots and stuff. So it's about managing their stress. They're just very stressed at the moment.
yeah.
So it's just about keeping, like, you've got to keep your, as a coach, your shit together.
Yeah.
So just getting like their phone posing sessions done and making sure they're looking good, finding out what the right amount of carbs they need for show day is, and those kinds of things. So these next few days are pretty chaotic. I don't think they have a chance to really be fearful or nervous until Friday, to be honest.
Are any of them in with a chance? Placing?
Oh, I think so. So I think my coaching client, Chloe, she's looking pretty good. She placed third last time we had her on stage a year and a half ago.
Wow.
She's made some really good improvements from last show to this one. So fingers crossed. And then there's a few of my posing clients as well on stage. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We shall see.
I hope things go well for them and yourself this
Thank you.
weekend. You'll be like a proud mum.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Great. Look, if we can maybe, there's a few more questions, Leticia, and I just kind of want to circle back on the addiction piece, because we've told a really good story here this evening, like from where you were to where you are now. Do you still refer to yourself as an addict?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah.
Do you still feel like one?
I do. And I don't think that is, like, I don't ever want that part of me to disappear or be dimmed, because to me, being an addict, and I get really angry that I question and like I struggle, if you want to look in yoga terms, with my throat chakra, with like my voice and speaking my truth in this, because of things that have happened that, you know, don't need to be spoken about on a podcast. For me, being an addict, if you've made it out, like, or if you've had significant clean time, like, that is powerful. That is like, that's worth reflecting on. It's worth being proud of, because it wasn't a period of a year in my life. It was a good portion of my life. Like, what, I just want to forget that person? Like, there was a girl in there and she made it out. And the more that I remind myself and I reflect on all of the things that have happened, and I start working through it more so, and I'm working with a healer back in Perth as well, and psychologists aren't for me. No.
Was this kinesiology or something
A
different?
lot of energy work, a lot of Amazonian medicine and things like that too. So, which has been really, really helpful to gain clarity and peace, and just a space where I can dig deep into, you know, all of those unhealed parts of me that are still, they still need to be, like, they need to be healed, and they need to, if I want to really move on and not feel the burdens of such a heavy addiction. And it's, you know, there's not a lot of people you can talk to about the few times I almost died, and you know, people that can help with the, I guess, how trying to have a normal relationship after all that kind of stuff. Like, it's not easy. So no, I really do. Yes, sorry, to answer your question, I do refer to myself as an addict one, and a very grateful one. A very, very grateful one.
I know this is something you feel strongly about as well, Leticia. How do you feel about how addicts are treated in today's society?
Yeah, this is probably, I love coaching, but this is something that just fuels a passion and a fire within me that I know I have to follow up in my life's work, my life's journey. And I feel like society needs to reflect on why they treat addicts as less than, as things that, almost things, not people. Things that, you know, it only adds to the problem within the addict. It doesn't create a space for a harmonious recovery or a fair go, especially if they don't have the strength, like, that I guess I had, and the if someone has, you know, I guess a different pathway through addiction, there's so many people that could be helped that end up dying. And so many of my friends are dead. So many of my friends are dead. And they didn't need to be, you know, but they already feel alone enough as it is. And it's a scary drug. Like, it's one of the worst in the world, coupled with some of the others that, and so why would you want to make that person feel even more isolated or different or weird? And I feel like that's what society does really, really poorly, because I know how I've felt, and in environments where I'm treated like, okay, cool. And this, I'll never forget this psychologist that I have so much respect for, the only one. He was like, I don't care if you come in here using, can you talk from your heart? Cool, come in here when you're like that. And I did this one time. And he was like, you're actually really normal. And I was like, yeah. You know, and I know that I don't even care who's listening to this, you know. It's not a normal thing. It's not okay. And, you know, I'm not saying that, but there is definitely a underlying message I'm trying to get across, that I think there's a lawyer that actually is on the same, I guess, wavelength. And it was contain and like normalize, bring it out from the underground, like stop making it something that is so shunned, because I can tell you right now, there are people that are allowed to recreationally use every weekend and do, that have more of a problem and are worse people in society to other people and to themselves than some of the people I know that are now dead. And so I just think that there needs to be another way.
Do you think there will be?
I hope so. I hope so. And there, you know, there is change starting, but it has to. It's not for every addict, because there are really bad people out there, you know. But for the ones that, like me, and for the ones that just need that extra support of, hey, I'm here. You know, not, hey, go to rehab. Yes, they need to go to rehab, but like someone that they can trust and someone that can be seen. Yeah, it makes all the difference.
I bet. You proud of yourself?
I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of myself.
What when you think about your journey, what gives you the most pride?
What gives me the most pride is that I always knew that, like, I always knew that the reason why I was able to actually truly make it out was of the things that I did to stop myself getting into worse, like mental places. And that's the one thing that's been proven true to me at the end of all of this. And that's what makes me the most proud, because it gives me assurance. It gives me clarity and understanding of what I went through, if that makes sense. And that's what I'm proud of. I'm proud of addicts who are still using, who are like, wow, like what you taught me about just like focusing on my mindset and keeping myself in a good, like a calm, like a good state, rather than, you know, losing myself. It helps me through, you know, so much. And so that's what I'm most proud of. And I find it really hard to explain. I find it really, really hard to explain. But yeah, I guess it's in that moment where, and this is what I guess I'll finish on, like I was running from fear and trauma and using an amount of drugs that terrified me. Plus it was ruining my life. Plus I was aware of all of this. How long does someone last in that state? And so I was an addict. Like I was a bad addict, needle using junkie by the end of it, if you want to call me that. So if I had have adopted the mindset of, hey, I'm a needle using junkie, would I be sitting here? No. I would use it to snap myself out of being really brain fried from smoking too much and being awake for too long. And that sounds so bad, and I can't believe I'm saying this on a podcast, but that's how proud I am of myself. So
good on you, mate. Like, final question for me this evening. What would you tell that version of yourself that was in prison with sores all over her face? What words of advice would you give her at that point in time?
I would have told her that Oof. I would have told her that the anger she held on to for so long was never going to serve any purpose. Because the anger that I felt delayed so many of the beautiful lessons that I've now learned. And I would have told her to trust the world a lot sooner than I did, than I started to.
That's a beautiful place to leave it, mate. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you
That's
so much for having
amazing.
me. Oh my God, I was so nervous.
Mate, you did so well. Thank you so much, Leticia. That was fucking powerful, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well done.